So this is like the part 2 video about sexuality in Transformers Prime. The first one I just released focused on the fandom rules and common misconceptions, which you might want to watch too. And here are some links below, skip to line continuity sections for the information of this video. I will give you the answers right away and then spend the rest of the video showing the proof, looking at examples, and debunking counter-arguments. Is Knockout actually gay? The answer applies to all Cybertronians. He is neither gay nor straight since Cybertronians lack sexuality. They have no sexual organs, they do not reproduce, so he and everyone else can't feel those feelings. Biological sex does not exist, but gender does. However, gender was a new concept to Cybertronians and so it adapts to the aliens they are dealing with. To us humans, our seed is clearly female, those resembling Solus Prime are. Romance exists among Cybertronians, although much more rarely, and it has no boundaries because it is individualized. Gender is not fixed and no one is sexual, so falling in love is a particular attachment to any bot. So all ships can be possible if the characters are compatible. However, most Cybertronians are aromantic, meaning they find complete happiness in friendships and hobbies. And so, Knockout is asexual, either polyromantic or aromantic. We will talk about his quirks and why he says what he says, but it is funny that the answer I just gave applies to everyone like Megatron, Predacons, Bumblebee. So this is one of those things that isn't my opinion but straight from the material. Of course some things can be argued, like should Predacons hurt or kill Starscream? Is Dreadwing actually honorable? What is the best depiction of lore? War for Cybertron or Exodus? The line continuity is inconsistent at times, but for this topic, there is one solid truth that makes my job easier. For newcomers, there is a very important thing to understand in this video. You can't use all Transformers cartoons, movies, and comics to find an answer. The movies are their own universe with their rules, some cartoons have their own, and the IDW comics are not connected to Prime at all. Characters are reused, which causes the confusion about Knockout. Knockout in the IDW comics is married to Breakdown, but in Transformers Prime, he is not, so we can't make the claim that they are in a relationship. We could of course argue this idea since it is open, but I can't make the statement to you that they are. So sometimes Transformers are built, sometimes they are sexual, and there's a whole wiki article about how different continuities handle this. The line continuity includes these 4 cartoons, some novels, some comics, 2 video games who are loosely attached, we're not sure, and a very important lore book. The plot is uncertain, but all these things say that Cybertronians are created by Primus, who is the core of their planets. Their bodies are made and given a spark life force. Then they ascend to the surface. These bodies are fully sized and mature, but of course, their lack of experience makes them immature, resulting in Smokescreen being treated like a kid. That is why I call it the Holy Hole. Yes, it is super mystical, and you might not like it. Transformers Prime is a very mystical show, although what is magic is just science they don't understand. Shockwave and Ratchet start figuring it out at the end of the show. In other Transformers material, the concept Sparkling describes a child born of Cybertronians. This does not exist here, and neither does the fandom idea of mech or femme. A female Cybertronian is not actually female, she has no uterus or milk, the males don't have sperm. This might not satisfy many people, but this is just the canon I am sharing with you. Most fanfiction completely ignores these rules, but as I continue the video I ask for an open mind. This is a touchier subject and it's very hard for me to do this without coming across as mean. The very mention of sexuality and gender can get me labeled as radical, and this video falsifies and critiques what people put in their stories, which can be difficult to hear. I understand that, and I don't blame people because a lot of us were younger, we didn't have access to anything that explained Transformers Prime, and the internet seemed full of people who knew what they were doing. If you watch Transformers Prime alone, there is no way you can understand how gender and creation works. You can even miss things if you read the books through only once. I was wrong for years before I finally sat down, read the book several times, watched the show a few times, read wiki articles a few times. I went back embarrassed and corrected things in my first fanfic. I am older now and able to see the harmful practices that I never noticed before. And so when I speak about them, this is where I expect the most dislikes. Even in my long video about Fanon, people were still supporting one particularly harmful idea that affects people in real life. This is why I feel driven to discuss it later on. So section 1 are the questions and 2 for the counter-arguments. How do Cybertronians reproduce? There are only 2 main ways a Cybertronian can gain a spark in life, through the Well of Allsparks or through cloning. 3 if you include the horrifying experiments like merging sparks together into a Frankenstein monster. Well of Allsparks, they are created by divine power which regulates their population and models them based on alien creatures. Primus is essentially their god, but here's the catch. Primus does not know where he came from. He was once a combined life form of Unicron, floating through space and seeing other planets. So there's the possibility that Primus was built, or created by a higher power. So after Solus died, her body melted through the ground to Primus, and since then, the well has expanded and started producing life. Micronus and Onyx also sacrificed themselves to the well to influence what life forms would look like. This is why Cybertronians look like the life forms of other planets. So you might hear Onyx referred to as the father of predacons, Micronus the father of minicons. This does not mean they had sex and produced offspring. This is a term used to describe those designed after them. Onyx was also the inspiration for the regular animals in Cybertron, such as turbo foxes. There was a period of time, thousands of years ago, called the Age of Evolution, in which the well made a lot of animals, some predatory. On Earth, sex means that killed animals can be replaced, but there, the well balanced the populations all by itself. Predacons were an animalistic Cybertronian created then. They evolved from nothing and evolved into nothing, so they are not like our dinosaurs. The similarity they have with dinosaurs is that these scary predators went extinct, and Cybertronians could then live without that fear. The well started to create mostly just the bipeds, and it stopped making the predacons altogether. This is not explained why, but my guess is that the predacons were cruel, and Primus didn't like that. Cybertronians began to colonize other planets thousands of years ago. They took a risk and took light from the Allspark and put it into pits they made on other planets, and so they made tiny wells of Allsparks that could create life elsewhere. Now the line between Cybertronian as a species or nationality blurred. We have bots now native to planets like Velocitron, so while Optimus ejected this Allspark, Velocitron was still making new bots. Cloning. So science developed and the Decepticons learned how to create bodies and limbs. Magic is being understood. Sparks are being drawn into these bodies, for clearly each Viacon does have a spark, and the Predacons do as well. The aligned continuity does not explain this topic well, so we can only speculate now that even though the Allspark was in that container, life could still come out of it, and the dead could still join it. When a spark dies, we don't see the light fly away. There's a brief mention about a hidden realm of death, which could answer how life could enter and leave the Allspark. Life made of deaths. Decepticons did this horrible thing where they killed a bunch of bots and combined their sparks to bring life into the space station called Triptychon. What is a protoform? This is not explained anywhere, but protoforms do not seem very common. It is usually portrayed as an underdeveloped Cybertronian. The most likely answer is that protoforms are bodies snatched from the well before they are fully developed. So they have organs but no distinguishing traits. So Starscream is able to finish them by using his DNA, which is, again, a mystical concept in that episode. It is hard to make sense of it, honestly, so this was my attempt. Why do they have genders? People often ask why female Cybertronians exist, but if the entire cast was male, they would never ask why do male Cybertronians exist, because the attitude is male is the norm, female is the exception. We know why this is in Transformers. As time goes on, we get larger female main casts. We get more females looking like robots instead of women coated in metal. The male characters can look like anything, can have weird body proportions and parts, and have an air of gender neutrality. The high feminization of these bots with lips and useless boob plates are why they stand out as the exception, not the norm. Transformers Prime has a complicated relationship to gender. Well, the show actually shows us 2 examples while the rest of the continuity does the explaining. So let's break it down. Where did gender come from? Primus would know about gender because he has seen aliens before. He has not seen humans, but he might have seen something like women before. So Solus's chest and proportions could be intentional because Primus copied diversity. Or it was by chance and we just gender any Cybertronian who happens to look like this as female. But the thing is, the original 13 Primes did not notice anything spectacular about her. They did not have gendered language. A human reader thinks Solus stands out. But you know who would? Onyx, he is modeled after animals. Micronus is super tiny. Amalgamus is a living mess. For a large part of Cybertronian history, they did not have gender. It only began when they started trading with aliens. And Cybertronians tried to show cultural understanding as a technological race to the organic ones. Since then, gender has entered their language. They noticed 2 types of brain patterns among Cybertronians. This is what is said, so it's not always body, but anyone who resembles Solus Prime. But Solus's brain was very imaginative and able to do several things at once, and this is the requirement Cybertronians make in deciding who is called female. 1 out of every 13 Cybertronians resembles Solus Prime. You might be able to safely conclude that 1 out of 13 is a minicon, 1 out of 13 is animalistic, and an animalistic minicon female would be something special. So now Cybertronians are recognizing differences within their species, but since there are so many differences between them, gender is never made extraordinary. Understanding language and viewpoints. I recommend my language video for this. So the Covenant of Primus book does these gender explanations, but at the beginning, Alphatran says that he is writing these summaries for human understanding. So Solus is called a she before anyone decided what a she was. Names, places, and words are translated. A name like Starscream would be a translation of star and scream in their language. A place like Icon might be pronounced differently, because they might not have those letters in their language. Translate Transformers Prime to Finnish, and there is no longer he or she. Now imagine other aliens encountering Cybertronians. What if females and males look different? What if they don't have those two genders? What if RC sounds male to them? Of course, when Cybertronians speak their language, all these words are going to change. They will still recognize that Solus Cybertronians are different, but they might not be she anymore but something else. A split in standards could mean Alphatran writing to readers from Planet X now calls Megatron female and Starscream male. This is super hard for humans to wrap their heads around, so when in doubt, just remember that humans aren't the only thing on Earth that has female. Two boobs and curves aren't on birds and reptiles. Cybertronian relationships. Are asexuals cold? Here is the very important thing I wanted to critique fanfiction and some comments for. Just because a species has no sexual attraction does not mean they aren't affectionate or capable of love. It also does not mean their relationships are missing something, and worse. Emperor Kumquat is just a cartoon, right? Oh well, my people. Asexual humans exist, and this is the sort of thing they face all the time. When sex is praised as the highest form of intimacy, people are shamed or saddened when they have not experienced it. The value of other activities is lessened. Ignorance about asexuality is high because it is hard for most to grasp being born without sexual desire. That happiness can be achieved without it, and this is why fans put sex into ships. Some people will find this is more relatable, but at the same time, it is a rejection of asexual relationships. Even harder to understand is the aromantic people of the world. People born with no urge to have a romantic partner. They are often believed to be lonely, but the way they are made means that they find complete satisfaction in family and friends. Here is the open-mindedness I wished for before. Cybertronians are not missing something, and we should not be disappointed in asexuality. When they aren't conquering planets, they are still warm and loving, even huggy and cuddly. Affection. They have been shown to like touching each other. Everyone loves putting a hand on Bumblebee's shoulder when he is down. Bulkhead is a happy hugger. When Smokescreen is sad, he gets pulled in close and walked away. When distressed, Optimus and RC place their hands in one another's. Bumblebee tackles Ratchet in excitement. Even cold old Shockwave and Megatron can't resist petting Predaking, who likes it. The proof is there. They show friendly and familiar affection. Affection in relationships. So what would a Cybertronian couple do? So there's only ever one confirmed pairing in the Align continuity, Solus and Megatronus. Oh yes, they used the L word. Megatronus and Solus were close, like leaning into each other. Probably lots of hugging behind the scenes. He brought her gifts, hung out with her, and felt jealousy because she had so many friends. Hugging was already a yes in friendships. You might ask, do Cybertronians cuddle? My guess is yes, because well, that sounds like hugging but longer. Do they kiss? This is also not mentioned, but there is a lot prompting me to say that no, they do not kiss. Point 1. Kissing is human culture, and not even present in old cultures. We often assume aliens kiss, but what would make two robots want to put their face holes together? There's often nothing protruding to grab onto. They can't even open their mouths far back, and they don't have tongues either. What they might do for closeness instead, head touching seems good enough. Relationships in society. IDW has an idea of conjux endura, I hope I said that right, but there's no confirmed term for Cybertronian couples in Aligned. There might be one, or they might just be in relationships without labels. Solus and Megatronus were very close, everyone knew it, but it was not called anything. But there is no argument against terms, it's just that relationships are truly uncommon. Alphatran, Vector, and Prima are by canon aromantic. They thought the strong attachment to one bot was strange and not necessary for their happiness because they found it already in their hobbies. Others such as 13, Onyx, and Micronus thought the idea was cute and sought stronger friendships than those three would. When does it happen? Now it is clear that Knockout could get attached to any character because they don't fall in love based on gender. I can't believe y'all ever believed anyone could be safe from Knockout's flirtatious energy. But focusing on Knockout, why is he so fruity? Well, Knockout and any Cybertronian can appreciate good looks in a non-sexual way, and so can any human. It isn't weird to have a love for fashion. Knockout makes a lot of comments about appearances in the show to Optimus, RC, Bulkhead, Starscream, Smokescreen, a Breakdown. I probably missed someone. You might inwardly think they look nice, but the compliments might not always be sincere. Knockout isn't in love with Optimus just because he complimented him. For a fact, Knockout never acts serious in missions. He never stops making jokes and puns, and his flirtatious behavior seems to be his entertainment or way of taunting them. No one needs to lust for the D to have this fabulous personality. When you ask, why is Knockout this way, just think, well, why not? The true debate for you all is, how serious is Knockout about his compliments? If he actually admires Starscream's look, or just said it because he didn't know what else to say? If Knockout has interest in Starscream, or if it was just a friendship that never happened? Do Cybertronians have families? What about adoptive relationships? I'm bringing this out because it's time to address the arguments people put forth to say Cybertronians are sexual. The use of words like brother, father, uncle, and aunt. Cybertronians have known about sexual aliens long before they met humans. They use words like this to describe concepts, or like Megatron's use of brother to describe something closer than friendship. RescueBot's Academy family. A character named Medix references various relatives and even calls Ratchet his uncle. However, family does not mean related. Consider this possibility: after the war, a bunch of new Cybertronians, immature and uneducated, come out into a war-torn world. Are they going to be left alone to live like adults? They can't even be trusted to not make a mess, so older Cybertronians were likely housing and raising these younger ones. Team Prime, who had won the war, had adopted the human idea of family. They would have known of families, but no one in the caste system would have had the opportunity to get so close and cozy. Optimus himself and RC have identified their group as family.
Friend of yours?
Family.
Family.
Because I told B I'd stay. He's family too.
Don't be ridiculous. You're not even the same species.
That's being related. It's not the same thing. I'll show you.
In the past, Ratchet did not understand family, so it's possible he became Uncle Ratchet and corrupted the kid with a love for medicine. Kid-sized. So precisely, RescueBot's Academy has you confused. A few years after RescueBots, which takes place during Transformers Prime and Robots in the Skies, we have a new generation. There are two ways to answer the question of why new Cybertronians are shown so small. 1, there's a little bit of growing to be done after leaving the well. 2, these characters just happen to be small. Or my belief, 3, that this was a necessary stylistic choice. RescueBots is a show about adult Cybertronians using their training to perform rescues, but RescueBots Academy is a show about young robots in school, learning how to be mature. It is a show meant to teach a child audience. How on earth would kids relate to adult characters bumbling around and acting childish if students were the same size as their teachers? There's also the character Wedge, who says that he used to be a Decepticon. He also shows more maturity than most of the other characters, so he's got to be older than he seems. Kid? Sometimes Smokescreen is affectionately called a kid, and I believe Bumblebee in the books at one point. These two, Bumblebee confirmed, were made in the last generation before the Allspark was launched. They are younger than the others, but Bumblebee has more maturity because he was out doing things while Smokescreen was stuck inside. Immaturity is how they see youth, so Smokescreen is a kid to them despite having an adult body. Starscream the First.
I could revive Cybertron and seize the throne as Starscream the First.
Starscream is not implying that he would have kids and name them after him, but that he would be so famous that others would name themselves after him. Think of Megatron naming himself after Megatronus. Flirting with RC.
Wimp. How's it humming?
Did he just?
Stronger, faster, studlier.
Bots can flirt without being sexual, same with humans. And it isn't because RC is female, since we discussed that it's not important to them. It may seem Ratchet is fond of her or just trying to act cool. Interfacing. Knockout shows this disgust for human sex, but uses the word interfacing.
Frankly, I find it repulsive. The whole idea of you fleshies interfacing.
People believe this is a Cybertronian word for sex, but this is not the case based on all that lore and the pause in the sentence. Knockout is looking for a tasteful way to put the gross subject, for if interfacing was a thing, the stress would fall upon fleshies instead. As in, you fleshies interfacing, that would be gross, opposed to the interfacing of other things. It doesn't say they don't have sex. Some people demand a specific line in order to believe it. The lore always states where they come from, and that the well regulates the population. Logic is what shuts down the argument, because if they had children, they would simply be around. You think all those slaves wouldn't be rampantly having unprotected sex? There would be child slaves, child labor, and a huge point in Megatron's anti-caste protest. If they had kids, no one would care about the Allspark being in space. There would be no worry of going extinct because they could have sex. We see that sparks can leave the Allspark for clones, so nothing would stop them from having kids. The Primes were together for a long time, and not one of them had kids, even though two were a couple. This argument is stronger if you say, well, it doesn't say they don't go to the bathroom, and until it does, I believe they do. I mean, I have trouble arguing that one, but you wouldn't like it if I ran around saying that, would you? Ancestors. Predacons references ancestors, but no one means bots they're descended from. Simply the older bots of their kind that used to exist. The Queen.
You know, a girl can never have too many accessories.
You were a Decepticon once. We can bring the prize to Megatron together.
Go back to that boys' club.
She absolutely loves her gender, being a bad bitch and evil queen. She still doesn't have a uterus though. How about spark sex? This is a fanfiction creation that people use when they want sex but accept the lack of genitalia. I really can't help but see all these additions as the shunning of asexuality again. First, we are assuming the bots would not damage their sensitive life forces. Then, we are assuming it would feel nice. But the hardest thing, why would that nice feeling just so happen to escalate into a climax in the same sexual pattern? Asexual sex for fun. Some people say that Primus gave them sexual organs just for something for couples to do. Again, this craps on asexuality and represents people's dissatisfaction with sexless relationships. It is hardly logical for them to have genitals just like ours for fun. I mean, there's no advantage for Cybertronians to be in relationships. The glitch. There is a video where someone asks aloud if Knockout is gay. Watch it and you hear a shrieking so loud you can barely hear anything else.
Knockout is gay, isn't he?
They try to explain that they come from the Well of Allsparks, but then a joke is made that there was a glitch in Knockout's creation.
Bots don't necessarily have, they don't have to reproduce, so there was a glitch in the Well of Allsparks.
Lots of laughs, except some people took this as Knockout being gay. We have to understand that this was for those laughs, that the well doesn't actually have glitches like a computer program. Nothing is abnormal about Knockout. They just know exactly what they did. They know. And so that is the whole topic, and I know a lot of you are probably not very happy with the answer, but there they are, and you can check out everything I just said for yourself by reading the books and looking at the wiki links. Thank you very much, happy reading and writing.
I'm on team 1. Who's with me?
I'll go.
After you, sir. Ma'am. Commander?